Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be visiting Singapore to look at one of their most shocking crimes of recent times. Our narration actually begins in China in 1966 when Wang Zhijian was born. He lived in Tianjin in China and had at least one sibling, a brother. Wang Zhijian worked as a port supervisor before leaving to work at a brokerage firm. He was married and had one son. In 1996, when he was 30 years old, he met a lady by the name of Chang Meng. They were briefly introduced by a co-worker, but had very little contact with each other at this stage. 8 years later, in 2004, Wang and his wife divorced due to incompatible differences, and his wife retained custody of their son. Seemingly out of the blue, in 2005, Chung contacted Wang and asked him to go out for coffee with her. During this meeting, Wang was open about the breakdown of his marriage and how depressed he was about this. The pair began to meet up each week and later twice a week before becoming romantically involved in March 2006. Chang was also born in 1966 and lived in Tianjin. However, unknown to Wang at the time, Chang was married to a policeman and had a 14-year-old daughter by the name of Feng Qianwu. 3 months into their relationship, Chang confessed to Wang about her husband and child. Wang Zhijian was shocked and considered leaving her, but Chang insisted that she was in love with him and wanted them to be together. To demonstrate her feelings, she decided to write in her own blood. She wrote, "I love Wang Qi," before Wang finished with "Jian, I want to marry him." The affair continued, and later that year, in November of 2006, Chang's husband called Wang and asked him to meet. When Wang Zhijian arrived, the husband told Chang that she needed to choose between the two men. Madam Chang Meng chose Wang Zhijian. When Chang's family found out about the affair, they were far from happy. Her younger brother, sister and brother-in-law went to Wang's workplace to harass him. Wang Zhijian also said that they had beaten him and threatened to kill him. Nevertheless, the relationship continued. Wang decided to take early retirement from his job, receiving a payout of around 400,000 yuan, which is almost $63,000, and the couple left Tianjin to live in Chengdu. However, by February 2007, Chang had returned to Tianjin to be with her daughter for the Chinese New Year. Soon after, as a declaration of his sincere love for her, Wang had a tattoo on his back of Chang's face together with a rose. Their affair continued, and Chang filed for divorce in 2007. However, shortly after this was finalised, her ex-husband had a stroke and Chang moved back to look after him. This put a strain on Wang Zhijian and Chang Meng's relationship, and they split up. About 4 months later, they reconciled, and Chang, together with her daughter, Feng, moved in to live with Wang. Despite Wang's efforts to bond with Feng, she hated him, blaming him for the breakdown of her parents' marriage. In order to get a better education for her daughter, Chang decided to look for a school for Feng in Singapore. Feng was accepted into Northview Secondary School, and Chang and Feng moved to Singapore in 2007. Chang was allowed to accompany her daughter while she studied in Singapore as a Pieju Mama. It's also known as a study mama. But with restrictions on working permits during their first year in Singapore, money was tight. Feng settled into her new school well and was reportedly very bright and sociable. Chang and Feng shared a rented apartment in block 349, Yishun Avenue 11, with another Pieju Mama, 36-year-old Yang Tia, and her 15-year-old daughter. The two young girls soon became friends. Wang Zhijian remained living in China, and by March 2008 the couple had separated yet again. But around this time, Wang added to his tattoo collection. He had a tattoo of a dead god on his arm to show how Chang was swallowing his heart, and a snake on the other arm to symbolise her vicious nature. Their separation was once again short-lived. Just a few weeks later, Chang temporarily returned to China and their relationship was rekindled. In July 2008, Wang visited Chang and Fung in Singapore for the first time. During his third visit in September 2008, the police received a call in the early hours of the 19th of September 2008. It was from a neighbour in the apartment block. The neighbour reported that a woman had fallen from one of the apartments and told the police that she often heard the sounds of arguing in the building. That evening, she had heard what sounded like furniture being thrown, a man shouting, then a woman screaming as she fell. However, the neighbour did not know which apartment the noises were coming from. The area was immediately investigated, and as the officers went from apartment to apartment, they eventually came to a door on the 6th floor which had bloodstains on the lock. The Singapore Civil Defence Force was called and forced their way into the apartment. Here they found Wang Zhijian and a shocking crime scene. In the bedroom were 41-year-old Chang and her 17-year-old daughter Fung. They were both dead, having been stabbed a total of 98 times. In the toilet off of the kitchen, they found Yang's 15-year-old daughter. She had also been stabbed and slashed numerous times. Miraculously, given the extent of her injuries, she had 41 knife wounds. She was still alive and was rushed to Tan Tock Seng Hospital. She was taken to intensive care with horrific injuries. Her right ear was almost torn off, and doctors had to remove her right eye in order to prevent the extensive damage, causing her to lose her sight altogether. It was established that it was Yang Chia who had fallen to her death from the apartment window. Wang was immediately arrested without any struggle, and the following day he was charged with Chang's murder. 2 weeks later, he was also charged with Fung and Yang's murders and the attempted murder of Yang's 15-year-old daughter, who for legal reasons could not be named. The attempted murder charge was later stood down as the prosecution proceeded with the 3 murder charges. During the police interviews, Wang provided his version of what had happened that night. He told the police how during his previous 3 trips he had experienced extreme abuse and humiliation at the hands of Chang and her daughter, Fung. He had spent a lot of money on gifts for the pair and expensive food. He claimed that he was forced to stay in Chang's bedroom whenever her daughter or other tenants were around. He said that as there were no toilet facilities attached to the bedroom, he was forced to use plastic bags or newspapers. Wang had to prepare the food for Chang and her daughter, but was never allowed to eat with them, only eating what was left over after they had finished. Wang claimed that he went along with these rules because he feared that if he didn't oblige, stricter rules would be imposed upon him. Wang had soon spent the majority of his retirement money on Chang and Fung and had to move back in with his mother when he was in China. Before this last visit to Singapore, he had withdrawn the remainder of his personal savings to assist Chang and Fung with a possible move to a different school. However, when he arrived, the pair once again demanded expensive food. When he returned with fish, an explosive argument erupted as the women wanted expensive crab, which normally costs over 100 Singapore dollars for the meal. That's about 73 US dollars or £55 sterling. When he went to bed that evening, Wang could not sleep. Angered by this ongoing treatment and the disrespect Chang and her daughter had shown him, he began to see red. Wang explained that he went into the kitchen in an attempt to calm himself down, but his fury erupted when he saw the seafood which he had brought dumped on a countertop. Grabbing a serrated knife, he returned to Chang's bedroom, positioned himself over her body and stabbed her multiple times. Awoken by the noise of her mother's murder, Fung went into the bedroom. Wang stated that he initially didn't recognise the girl, simply thinking that he must kill the person standing in the doorway. He stabbed the 17-year-old multiple times and claimed to only realise that it was Fung after he began to calm down. Wang then went on to state that the door of the bedroom next door then opened and he saw Yang and her daughter. As he approached them, Yang managed to get out of the room, but Wang attacked the young girl, who managed to kick him and escape to the toilet next to the kitchen. However, the flimsy sliding door provided little protection and Wang cut through it with 2 knives. He then attacked the girl again, believed that she was dead and prepared to leave the flat, which was when the police arrived and arrested him. He claimed to have no idea about what had happened to Yang. It would take over 2 years for the case to come to trial after meticulous investigation by all of those involved, leading to over 1,000 exhibits being presented when the trial started on the 22nd of November 2011. By this time, Wang testified that he did not remember how he attacked the victims and that his mind had gone blank due to excessive rage. He insisted that he didn't kill Yang, despite claiming to not know what happened that night, and also stated that he did not remember making his statement to the police. The prosecution agreed that the timeline of the events leading up to the murders was consistent with Wang's police statement. The murders of Chang and Feng were also consistent with what Wang had previously said to the police. However, the prosecution account of Yang's death and the attempted murder of her daughter were different to what Wang had claimed. The prosecution showed that immediately after murdering Chang and Feng, he went to the kitchen to get a new weapon, a chopping knife, before going to Yang and her daughter's bedroom to kill the two of them due to them being potential witnesses. Wang had injured his hand during the attack on Chang and Feng, and all three of their blood was found on the door handle to Yang's bedroom, indicating that Wang had opened the door. The serrated knife which was used in the first two murders was found under the mattress in Chang's room and did not have either Yang or her daughter's DNA on it, disproving Wang's claims that he had attacked the other two tenants straight away. The prosecution also found smudges of Yang's blood on the exterior wall outside of the kitchen window. This, together with bruising to her inner fingers, showed that she had been gripping tightly to the bamboo pole holders outside of the window after climbing out to evade Wang. The exterior sides of her fingers showed numerous deep cuts, and the prosecution argued that Wang had used the chopping knife to hack at her fingers, causing her to fall to her death. None of Yang's blood was found inside the house, supporting the theory that her fingers were slashed outside. The prosecution argued that Wang was in control of his actions and hadn't lost self-control during the attack. They showed that he was cohesive enough to shower to get rid of the victim's blood, change his clothes, bandage his injured hands, pack his bag and get ready to leave. Yang's daughter, who was by this time 18 years old, testified that on the night she was awakened by sounds of Feng shouting, objects falling, and a noise like someone was being suffocated. She and her mother thought they should call the police, but before they had the chance to, their door swung open and Wang appeared. Yang escaped, but the daughter was cornered. Wang slashed at her with the chopping knife and she raised her arms to defend herself. He then left the room to find her mother. He returned and once again attacked her, but she managed to kick him, making him lose his balance and ran to hide in the kitchen toilet. Wang then slashed at the door until it collapsed and entered the toilet, continuing to slash at the daughter's head, face and neck. As she collapsed to the floor, she was stabbed in the back, right ear and back of the neck. Throughout the trial, Wang had an almost permanent grin on his face. Psychiatric reports stated that Wang was suffering from an adjustment disorder, possibly as a result of the treatment he experienced from Chang's family members, the loss of his employment and retirement fund, along with the humiliation and mistreatment experienced at Chang's hands. In July 2012, while awaiting the verdict, Wang Zhijian assaulted another inmate while in jail. It is unknown why he did this, although it was reported that the man had accidentally bumped into Wang earlier. It wasn't until 4 months after closing arguments were made that Justice Chan Seng-on delivered his judgment. He agreed that Wang was suffering from diminished responsibility when he murdered Chang, largely due to his anger over his mistreatment by her. Justice Chan believed that his loss of self-control was exacerbated by the adjustment disorder from which he suffered, and as such found Wang guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder for Chang's death. Culpable homicide could result in a punishment of a fixed prison term together with fining and/or caning up to a maximum term of life imprisonment. With regards to Chang's daughter Feng, Justice Chan agreed that Wang was still in a frenzy of loss of self-control, and as such the two murders were committed as a single act. He again found Wang guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. However, in the case of Yang, the longer series of events occurring after the previous two deaths, including looking for new murder weapons, led Justice Chan to assess that Wang had time to recover some of his self-control and as such was not suffering from diminished responsibility at the time of her murder. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Wang filed an appeal against his murder conviction, whilst the prosecution appealed against the 2 culpable homicide convictions. In November 2014, the Court of Appeal dismissed Wang's appeal. They did, however, allow the prosecution's appeal. Wang was subsequently found guilty of the murder of both Chang and Feng after the appeal judges stated that they were not satisfied that Wang had lost self-control due to his adjustment disorder, thus rejecting the defence of diminished responsibility. The judges stated that he had killed Chang out of massive uncontrollable anger and had then wanted to silence Feng as a witness to her mother's murder. He was then sentenced to death for the 2 additional murders. Wang Zhijian was subsequently executed by hanging on an unspecified date. Despite her horrendous ordeal, Yang's daughter remained in Singapore to finish her education, supporting herself from her mother's savings and public donations. It has been reported that she graduated with a diploma in design from a local polytechnic and has turned to Christianity, which has been helping her to cope with the traumatic events she experienced. Just like to pass on my thanks to Millie Lemmy, who suggested that I cover this case, as she had been looking at other Singapore cases. Thanks for the suggestion, Millie. Singapore has one of the lowest crime rates in the world, and chewing gum is totally banned in the country. Please add any comments down below. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. The tallest indoor waterfall in the world is in Singapore. It's located at the Jewel Changi Airport. Goodbye.